So welcome everyone. It's an honor to have you all here at our next event. Crowdsource, the event is titled Crowdsource Helping Africanize Technology. And we are really excited to have you attend our our event. And yeah, we just would like to say welcome, a heartwarming welcome to everyone. And we're really excited to have you here. And we're even more excited for our guest speaker, Leesego, who will be taking us through crowdsource helping Africanize technology. So, a brief introduction. So, I would like to welcome Lesego Ndlovu, a passionate advocate for technology's power in empowering individuals. Leesego's programming journey began with JavaScript, fueling their startup Bold Talent and igniting a lasting love for software development. As a co-organizer of GDG Soweto, he connects with and inspires fellow coding enthusiasts, making a profound impact in his community. Join us in welcoming Leesego to the stage.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Jess. Let me also just share my screen as well. Give me a second. Is it showing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let me start giving the talk. So today's talk, I've titled it AI Speaks All Languages, the Power of Localized Machine Learning. And essentially, the reason why I chose this topic was because, given for those who are attending for the first time, crowdsource essentially is an online digital tool that Google has created whereby anyone from the public can actually log on using their normal Gmail account and actually start contributing to data collection for helping their technology work better. And what that means essentially is to be able to have localized content, meaning to assist Google in making our content be local in our own African languages. So, the first part I'm going to speak about today are actually the challenges of AI. So, the first part there, where we speak about the challenges of AI, are actually the lack of localization. So, what this means is that when we look at the web, currently over 45% of the web is actually not in English. And what this means is that there are different parts of the internet of which we are unable to access duly because of the fact of a language barrier, right? And this is not to mention also other inclusivity challenges that are there, such as people with different abilities to use the web. So this could be people who are either deaf or blind or have color vision impairments, for example. Now, when it comes to assisting Google Crowdsource to collect data, essentially what we're trying to do is to make technology more accessible within our communities. And this is prevalent for all communities in which we come from. So there shouldn't be any digital divide, which is essentially the second point that I have there. So the digital divide essentially is to say that there is a lack of access to digital technology and also importantly digital skills for people within our communities. Now, the issue is that currently we're looking at the fourth industrial revolution, but already there are skills which were acquired within the first few revolutions that took place in terms of business that our people, meaning Africans, didn't able to upskill upon. And now with the new wave of AI and programming, we're even being left further behind. And this is actually the challenge in which we're trying to solve for to enable people from different communities, especially our youth as well. So, high school learners, primary school learners, to actually start developing digital skills so that we can actually start having our own people developing AI for us and not having our digital products be made overseas and then tailored for our local markets. So, the second part I'm going to speak about today is actually what exactly is localization. So localization is essentially the adaptation of a product, service, or technology, and it making it to correspond to the linguistic or cultural standard of a given country. So what this means is, for example, we have Facebook, right, which has a huge amount of different languages that you can actually use it for. So when Facebook was originally developed, it was made for English, right? But one of Facebook's biggest net growers was actually being able to use Facebook in different languages. So this is where the importance of localization comes in. It's when we enable people from different regions and different backgrounds to access our digital products in a way that is more culturally and linguistically relevant to them. So when we look at also different products, for example, within our own local context from South Africa, so if we look at stores like, for example, Take a Lot, or we look at experiences such as DSTV now, which is the digital streaming platform, right? These are both products which are also given in people's local languages. Hence, for example, when you look at sports commentary on DSTV, you're able to actually listen to the Rugby World Cup or any other sporting match in your own language. And this increases the use and relevance and relatability to content. So, localization is extremely important when it comes to making technology and services relevant and accessible to people from different communities and backgrounds. So the second part I'm going to go into now is actually speaking about how can we actually assist in terms of bridging the digital divide. So as I mentioned earlier on, the digital divide is essentially the gap that is there between the access that is available for our communities to actually start learning digital skills and also the inability for them to access people within their networks to grow the digital skills as well. So now when we look at the first part when it comes to content localization, an example of this is when we look at programming languages that are very prevalent in the world, right? This could be Python, it could be JavaScript. They're obviously written in English, right? That essentially means people that write code have to speak English. And this cuts out a huge part of the world because there are people that are only able to speak their native tongues and also want to learn how to program. But then the first barrier before learning how to program is actually learning the language. And when we look at the Asian markets, they have been able to develop Asian programming languages. Hence, they've been able to also start developing their own sort of frameworks and AI models. And most of these have come from the biggest companies that are based in China. An example being Baidu. So Baidu is an internet engine that is similar to Google, but is actually based in China and is focused on essentially giving results based off of the Chinese market, the Chinese internet. So localization is very important when it comes to us being able to develop the skills of our youth and to be able to have a digitally inclusive community as well. The last part there under assisting us to actually bridge the digital divide is actually collaboration. So the reason why collaboration is important is because when it comes to technology, there's something which is called open source communities, right? And essentially, open source communities are communities that contribute to the betterment of technology freely. This means without any remuneration for doing that. An example of that is today's talk and today's host, which is Google Crowdsource. So, Google Crowdsource is an open source platform that was made for people from different backgrounds to be able to contribute to actually localizing content and making sure that the digital divide is actually closed. So now I want to go into actually the power of localization and why localization is so important in today's world. So the first point there actually says that 9 out of 10 people would disregard a product if it is not available in their native language, right? And this is so true because when we look at different products that have been able to scale globally, in the regions in which they first began, an example being a company like WeChat, right? So WeChat is essentially the WhatsApp of China as well. And the reason why WhatsApp or any previous internet media service related, such as Facebook or Messenger, never worked in the East, apart from China having its own political reasons, countries such as South Korea as well, Taiwan, is because it was never relevant to them. They were never actually English users of the platform. But because their entrepreneurs from their own ecosystems were actually able to develop the exact same technology, a communication tool, but give it to their market in a language which is accessible to them, is what made their product to grow. So this is why localization is so important when it comes to the adaptation of products, especially in the early stage of an ecosystem in a business. Now, the other part in terms of why localization is important is because it actually ties into the last point of ease of use. People are only going to be able to use something which they find easy, and language is one of the biggest barriers that are prevalent in using technology. So when users are able to access technology and services in their own languages, it makes it a lot easier for them to use and also learn. So I just want to go into a few examples of localization. So the first is how Netflix actually uses localization to translate the subtitles of their content into different languages across the world, right? So, as everyone is familiar, Netflix is used to making series, and most of these series are actually English based. But Netflix is a global company that is watched by people from over 90 countries in the world. And now being able to translate those simple translations assist people to actually access the content, right? And an example of that is Money Heist. So Money Heist is a show that was originally made in Spanish, but the ability for it to be translated and dubbed into English made it one of the biggest shows in the world. So this also shows why localization of content is so important when it comes to the adoption of content in new regions and new countries. And the second example that goes along with Money Heist is called Squid Game. So Squid Game was originally also made in Korean, but once it was able to be translated into English and different languages as well, like Spanish and French, it became also one of the biggest shows in the world. So this is also an example to show everyone that localization is extremely important when it comes to products being relevant and understandable to consumers from different backgrounds. The second example I like to go into there is Meta, which is normally known as Facebook as well. So, as I mentioned earlier, Facebook being able to offer its product in different languages is what made it to be able to be adopted in new markets as well. However, apart from Facebook, they have a product called Messenger, which is a part of Facebook, but also a standalone product on its own that you can download. And Messenger, one of the things that made it also grow was that when people want to communicate from people from different regions, Meta actually allows for instant translation on its products. So if I'm chatting with someone from, let's say, China or from France, it can actually auto translate my English text into French text. And this allows for communication to take place. So it's the exact same product, but literally the enablement of allowing communication by allowing translation allows for the product to be accessible to people from different backgrounds, and most importantly, for it to be also relatable to people from different languages to speak to each other. And this also leads to an increase in connectivity and actually closing as well the digital divide. The last example there that I'd like to speak about is Microsoft. So, Microsoft, as you know, Microsoft Office is one of their biggest products, and everyone in the world has to make, Word documents, presentations, and most of the tools that you use when using it is in English, right? However, simply by translating the features on Microsoft into different languages allows people from different regions to use the product. So, through these examples, I've tried to show how important localization is, and more essentially, how it actually allows for ease of use by people from different regions. And this is what leads to adaptivity in our communities. So, the second part I want to go into as well is actually about the importance of diverse data sets when creating AI. So we're all very familiar with the fact that there is something called bias when it comes to making AI. And normally, bias comes about whenever the data sets are very limited in scope. And there are various issues that come about because of that. So, firstly, one of the reasons why diverse data is important is because we want to avoid bias mitigation. And what this means is, for example, if we look at our local market, and this is a normal example that is normally made is when you look at a job placing application that uses AI. If the AI is built simply on the current trends in the market, which would show huge unemployment, it would show that white females actually have preference of being placed in the workplace ahead of our black or colored or Indian counterparts, then the AI itself would continuously hire people from a white background. And this is what leads to bias in our AI models. So when we have different people from different backgrounds, such as ourselves, using a tool such as crowdsource to actually contribute, we are allowing for there to be a diverse data set so that the AI models that are actually built globally start to be more inclusive. And this is why our community is actually contributing in a technological way assists for AI to become less biased and more inclusive. The second part about why diverse data sets are important are because when we look at the point of the market and audience expansion, as I mentioned in the previous slide when I was giving the examples, we saw how simply translating the services or the content from English to different languages allows for new audiences and new markets to be entered and for new access as well. So diverse data sets are important because it allows for us to include a wider range than is normally available to us. And that essentially culminates in the last point of inclusivity. So inclusivity is very important when it comes to developing technology, technology that is actually going to drive the whole society as opposed to those that are normally preferred in society. Okay, so now we can come to another key hot topic that is currently there today, and that is the ethical concerns within AI. And there are definitely many, but today I've chosen to focus on personally what are my top two. So the first part is actually about autonomy and accountability. And what I mean by this is if I go back to my example about hiring in the workplace and having an AI model that would actually then hire people without any consultation, what tends to happen is that because there could be a bias in the system, who then becomes accountable for the hiring of the person? So if the AI, for example, hires first a white female over a wide range of applicants that were received, who then actually becomes accountable for that decision? Is it the AI, or is it the team that developed AI, or is it the company itself? So these are some of the new concerns that are coming about in AI. And accountability and autonomy are two different aspects. And when we first look at autonomy, we look at allowing the AI to do what it was built to do, which essentially could be a variety of things from giving recommendations or doing translations. However, we should not confuse the autonomy of allowing AI to do its job with accountability because the accountability actually lies with the company and the people behind that are developing these systems within our society. So it's very important for us to understand the difference between autonomy that we allow and empower within our AI systems, but to not forget the accountability that goes along with it for those that are actually developing it. The second point about ethical concerns which are there for me today are actually transparency and explainability. And by this, I mean, for example, when we look at what is normally called a black box, which is an AI that is using deep learning. So, the first part of AI is normally something called like recommendation systems. And this is where we give it a set of data to choose from. But then you get into the second part of machine learning, which actually looks into deep learning. And this is now where we don't exactly tell the AI to do. The AI can actually generate ideas from itself and tell us what it could do. But now, one of the challenges about having that second level of AI, essentially deep learning, is that there can be a lack of transparency in terms of looking at how these models are built. So, an example is ChatGPT. It's been widely known that ChatGPT has over a million parameters, when making a response for a user. So when you have an AI model that has over 1 million data points, how can people actually look into that model to see where the weighting is coming from, and actually to realize how does the AI get to that decision itself? So those are one of the concerns which come about when we get into deep learning and into this new generation of Gen AI, which is generative AI, is that there tends to be a lack of transparency in terms of the AI models and actually being able to explain how these AI models reach the answer that they are giving us. So now I want to look into the potential of why, when we localize our AI, what the exact benefits of that are. So, firstly, the most important part is really the inclusive part of innovation, right? So, firstly, by being able to localize content, we enable innovation. An example of that is when you look at Kenya, there's a company which was developing what's the exact word? Translation tool, but using sign language, right? So, like a robotic sign language translation tool. And now, normally, if you're an English speaker, you can translate from English and do it into that. But now, for someone from Kenya who might not exactly know English and might be speaking a different language such as Shona, how would they be able to actually learn the docs, meaning the documentation, to develop such a solution? So sometimes there are technological tools available and frameworks available for us to develop new stuff, but people aren't able to actually read about how to use those tools. So literally the translation of documentation and frameworks allows for new innovators to actually enter the space. So localization of our content allows for also inclusive innovation because it allows for innovators and entrepreneurs from different backgrounds to access these tools in ways that are relevant to them. And this is actually what leads to also economic growth because, as mentioned in my example about Money Heist and Squid Game, which were Netflix series, the fact that they were able to garner so much attention and so much audience globally literally made the company grow itself in terms of a revenue perspective. And this further enabled them to actually invest more in the Spanish department that made Money Heist to develop new shows and also to give money to the Korean market that made Squid Game to also make new content as well. So localization of content also enables economic growth because the content which was previously only relevant or accessible or understandable by a certain market then becomes accessible in a wider market, and this can allow for growth from the initial point. The third point about why localization is transformative is because it also preserves the local identity. So, as you can imagine, when we look at the Egyptian pyramids and we look at the museums that are there right now, a lot of the stuff that is written there, of course, was written in Sanskrit, right? Which is the original language that was used when the museums and content that was there was actually built. But now, if everything were to be translated into English, there's a lot of meaning which would be lost in that. So, localizing content also makes sure that we preserve the identity of the things that are most important to us in our societies. And this is why localization is really, really important when it comes to inclusivity in our communities. And that obviously ties into the last point of empowering communities, because by allowing our communities to access technology and digital tools, as well as to develop their skills, this empowers our communities to grow. So, thank you for the time for me to be able to give this talk. Now, I would like to jump into the second part where I'm going to log into Google Crowdsource and essentially show you the simple ways in which you can start contributing on Crowdsource. Okay, if there are any questions, you'll just let me know if you see any questions in the chat. But I'm just gonna now jump onto the Google crowdsource and just give an example of essentially how we can start contributing in our local communities. Okay, so when you log into Google Crowdsource, you literally just type crowdsource into your Google search console. And then when you log in using your Gmail, you can then start contributing. And this doesn't need you to be a programmer or anything intense. It's nothing like that. It's really, really simple to start contributing. And as you can see here on the landing page, there are various ways in which you can contribute. So you can contribute through validating handwriting, or you can read handwriting and see if you can type it back and see if it was correct. There's also parts like image labeling, handwriting recognition, and audio, for example. So I'm going to come to what I normally like, which is image label verification. Okay, so while that's loading, let me attend to the question that Mpumi asked in the chat. So you said, what's the best way to collect data to have a widespread data set? Okay, that's a really good question. I really think that firstly, it would depend on sort of the problem that you're trying to solve for, and as well to understand that who your solution will be targeted to. But most importantly, also to understand that apart from once you have your persona in terms of who your clientele would be, to also understand that the persona that you might have for your clientele, they could have this various challenges that we mentioned earlier, such as color vision or being deaf or being blind. And you need to still test your data with those people as well, on top of the base persona that you may have, so that you can understand the data that is relevant to those different types of people. I hope that answers the question. So I'm going to come to the image label verification. I'm going to come to something like tennis. So as you can see here, very simple yes or no question, right? So it says, does this image contain tennis? Of course not. It contains a lady on a surfboard. So I'm going to say no, right? Does this image contain tennis? Yes, it does. Does this image contain tennis? Well, there isn't a ball in there. There isn't a tennis racket in there, but it is a tennis player, right? So if you're unsure, you could say skip. As you can see, for example, this next image, this is definitely no tennis in here, and we'll say no. Now with this image, it's also quite a tricky one because this is actually table tennis. It's not tennis straight, right? So I'm going to say no. So my point in showing you these few examples is that literally with yes or no, you can actually start contributing to different crowdsource elements for AI to be more relevant. Now, in this scenario, it's more related to computer vision. But as I did show earlier on, when we come to our console log here, there are also ways to contribute when it comes through from a translation perspective. And that's where now the localization element comes in as well. So let me come to handwriting validation. See, see if they match. Okay, so this is an example. So this says root. There's no way. I don't even see root there. I can't see root. So I'm gonna say no, right? Okay. It says, does the text match term hashtag mailman? Okay, it does look like it. So I will say yes. In this example, it says the number 186. That is definitely clear. I will say yes as well. In this last example, it says way, W A Y. I will also agree to that. So as you can see here where I'm hovering, right, there it says languages. And right now it only says English because essentially I'm on level one of crowdsource. But as you contribute more to crowdsource, you will get different options to start contributing. So, for example, from this African context, we could start contributing in isiZulu, in Sesotho, in Tswana, in Pedi, and these are the things which are very important when it comes to localizing content, especially for children and youth from the different backgrounds that we have. So I just want to come back to show the last example here on crowdsource. Let me come to food labeler, right? Okay, let's see. Okay, it says, is shrimp tacos in the dish? Okay, I'm gonna say no because I see tacos, but I don't see shrimp, so that's fine. Okay, it says, is chicken sandwiches, chicken tenders, and popcorn chicken the dish shown in the image? Okay, I'm not sure what they mean by popcorn chicken or if they mean nuggets or what, but I'll say yes for now. That's fine. This one says, is orange chicken shown in the image? Okay, I don't know what they mean by orange chicken, so I'll say skip. This one asks, is there a Brokeback burger and fries? Okay, I don't know what's a Brokeback burger, but there's definitely fries, so I'll agree to that. And this last one, it says, is liver and onions shown in the image? And I'll say yes. So, literally, let me go back to home and show you. So in this session, I've gained about 17 points because I was at level 2 and I had 2 points before we started this chat. So now I'm already at 19 points. And that's how quickly you can gain points. And with these points, you can redeem, obviously, various vouchers from Google as well. And that essentially is the main way in which you can contribute to localization of content and, most importantly, to allow for inclusivity on the web through Google Crowdsource. So I'd like to say thank you for everyone's time and the opportunity to speak about AI and the importance of localization in tech as well.
Thank you so much, Lesego, for your wonderful presentation. So I don't know about anyone else, but I've got questions. Um,
Mhm.
so, so I recently got the opportunity to attend the Deep Learning Endowment, and what I've noticed is that big corporations like Google, Meta, OpenAI, Microsoft, they are all actually the ones saying they want to include
Mm,
African languages and stuff, which I find very ironic. But I think the thing is like they have all the technology and they're willing to obviously get someone and then like obviously translate and everything. But I feel like what's missing there is that it's our languages and we should be the one contributing to have a representation of it. I
mm,
think that's the one thing that I didn't like about when I went there because there was like research projects and they're all Google research projects, but they're all from a Googler perspective and none of them maybe partner with African countries to kind of bring African languages to like Google Nest and like Google Assistant because there's only so many few like languages on on those products specifically. So like Google search is fine because there's like a lot of languages, but not a lot of it is incorporated within the products. So they're
mm,
trying to incorporate African languages within the products and like saying you can ask your Google Nest in Swahili to play a song. That's kind of where they're going. But I feel like it's it just seems so like it's not coming from us, and that's like the part I don't like
mm,
because it is our languages. We would know it better, and even if they did bring it along, are they going to make us publishers or like give us rights to the content that we contribute to them? So I feel like there's all this game of like who's publishing it, is it going on our papers type of thing. So it's very like conflict bound, but that's what I noticed. And even like the sign language, Kenya is looking into that. I think the only thing that someone was having trouble with was that, when you do videos and stuff, you can't, with the Puppy Act, you can't have actual people. So they actually videotaped all the different students in schools, um,
mm,
from deaf schools. So the sad part is like when you start junior school and primary school, I mean primary school and high school, you do they have their separate schools, right? So what she was trying to say is when they get to university, they're like on their own in the sense that they must learn to adapt and like, you get disability support or whatever. So what they did is they videotaped all the sign language, and it's so weird because sign language is different in every single language all over the world.
mm, mm.
So it's not like you can have a general sign language even for English. And what she was saying was that she noticed that they teach them the UK version or the USA version of sign language, so that if they had to go there, they'll be fine. But if they go anywhere else, it's a bit problematic. Um, so yeah, they were having problems with the. So the thing is, they don't really have robots yet to like do the sign language. So obviously, there's a whole thing about Africa doesn't have access to this technology, so they can't film people doing it. That's the thing because of the Poppy Act. And the thing is, the face is a part of the sign language. Your facial expression is a part of sign language. So you actually kind of need a robot that's got a facial expression to kind of go with the sign language. So that was quite interesting to hear. But it's nice to see that they are thinking about it. I would like to see it here though. I haven't quite
Mm,
seen it implemented here, but it seems like a lot of people are doing work around languages because it's quite broad and for someone to access their language is quite noticeable. And it's the thing that draws people. So there was also someone that did something on the five most common, I don't know, five least common accents or languages in Nigeria. And that was also quite interesting. She also said it was hard because they don't really have the technology to like conduct the experiments. Like when she just did it point blank. Like they didn't include gender and like it took like longer stages to become a database and things like that. So I feel like we just lack the technology. And then what is happening is that all these global companies want to incorporate all these African languages, and it's not even like coming from us as Africa. And then yeah, it's just quite it's very conflicting to hear that. And then yeah.
no, it's true. It's true. I mean, obviously, given that they're the ones that started the technological revolution in a way, they were the first movers, and having done that now, they have that advantage. And it's unfortunate that, from an African perspective, due to the fact that, as I spoke, in terms of our digital skills not being developed, we were obviously left behind from the beginning. And now, with the whole new AI wave, that actually creates a bigger digital divide. So, it is important for, firstly, the awareness to be raised in our communities in terms of us being able to know why Africanizing and contributing to African content and African technology is important to actually show why that gap needs to be closed. Otherwise, it will always be American companies or overseas companies trying to push us to actually contribute for them, as opposed to us contributing for the purposes of our own development as well. So, yeah, it is quite disheartening, but hopefully, with more crowdsource meetings, we can raise that awareness.
Definitely, yes, I agree. Um, so that was like one of the questions I had, and then also I like so I've this thing like how global organizations always work out a way to kind of reach everywhere along the world. But now, what do we do when we have localized businesses, but they can't really like go that way? So I feel like the global organizations have almost like closed that market in the sense that they are the only ones that can go global. In other words, go all languages, and we kind of can't. So we might be able to cater for like maybe our African continent, but then we can't cater for the world. And I feel like we're just being kicked out of the globalization part of having businesses like yeah. So I feel like that's also something to think about.
Yeah, that is a good point. That is a good point. But what I can say is, in terms of having African products be relevant to overseas markets, are that, well, firstly, there are a lot of APIs that are able to be used overseas, right? And what I mean by that is, you firstly have Google Translate, right? So any company, even from Africa, can actually start to use Google Translate to allow for their own content to be accessible in maybe European or American countries, right? And an example I'll give of that. So there's a store in Kenya. It's called Jumia, right? So Jumia is like one of the biggest e-commerce companies in Africa, And they actually have started to see a lot of adoption as well from the European market, literally by just enabling French on their site, right? So there definitely is a way for us as Africans and African businesses to allow for our products to be adopted in overseas based markets. But it definitely does need us to be aware of that and enable us to localize our content for them in their own way, which is understandable. So yeah, I can agree with you on that. I see Koliso has a question as well.
Hi everyone. Lesego, thank you so much for an informative presentation. I guess my question is, what's Google's value proposition to you guys as entrepreneurs in this space to become contributors? So you are contributing and you are helping change some of their content and making it in our local language, as you've mentioned. But what is it in it for you? So Google is obviously going to reach a wider market if you do this work. But what's in it for you as an entrepreneur in particular to do this work, and to, if you would, collaborate and work with Google to obviously translate and make their content localized and all these things? What's in it for you?
Thanks, Koliso. Thanks for the question. Okay, so actually there's a variety of things, right? So firstly, Google does have programs which are specifically focused for entrepreneurs. An example of that is the Google Launchpad Africa. So Google Launchpad Africa is a program which takes up startups and gives them funding up to $100,000 equity free as well. So it's like a grant essentially, along with a year program for entrepreneurship, mentoring, and coaching, right? So there is a specific program that's made for entrepreneurs. There are also a second part which is called the Google Startup Programs. And essentially, the Google Startup Programs has content around startup business stuff. So essentially, it could be mentoring or coaching sort of sessions, as well as giving credits for the cloud use. So that's the second part. Thirdly, another reason why this is important in terms of saying the benefits is that we are actually able to use the APIs ourselves. So, for example, as I said, something like Google Translate API, right? It's something that we can use as a business. So when we actually raise awareness in different communities and contribute to it, we might not have a direct contribution in terms of monetary value, but from a technological standpoint, when we actually improve the translation or the localization of that content, it enables us when actually developing as well to benefit from those learnings because we use it within our technology stack. And then lastly, the benefit is actually just the enjoyment of talking about technology and being involved in our community. So that's the third part, which is more a personal one. But those are sort of the three categories I would say we benefit from being involved in such a empowering thing such as crowdsource.
Thanks, Lesego.
Thank you, Koliso.
Um, does anyone have any other questions or comments, or agreements or suggestions or questions about the topic? Okay, so I will take it as um, everyone has no more questions. So I just would like to say thank you to Leesego for preparing a wonderful talk. I really enjoyed it. I liked how it kind of complemented what I saw at the Deep Learning in Durban, and it's like more motivation to obviously represent Africa with African technology. Um, and obviously that is important because we come from Africa, and would be amazing to represent our country with our own technology. And it's probably something we can work towards. We are, I would like to say, behind, but I feel like we can get there if we collaborate and work with each other. It's very possible. And we have amazing talent in Africa as well. Like, I think that's one of the things we keep forgetting, and we need to recognize that we do have the talent here and it is possible. So, just would like to thank you. It was a really informative talk, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. And thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Jess, and thank you to everyone for joining today's talk. Much appreciated.